Well, hello. Thanks for coming back to check out another video. So, we are here today to sit down and do round 2 of would I repurchase these 10 randomly selected eyeshadow palettes. I had so much fun filming this the first time around, and I'm so glad that you guys enjoyed it and wanted a round 2. There's probably going to be a round 3, 4, 5, I don't know, until we talk about all the eyeshadow palettes. So either way, I'm really glad that you guys are enjoying it. And I have to say, I'm super excited because I have seen so many other people do this. So I saw Becca do it, I've seen Laura do it, I saw Ruth do it, and I've seen Misty do it. I'm going to leave all of those lovely ladies as well as their videos linked in my description box because I highly encourage you to go and check them out if you haven't already, if you really like this style of video. They did such a wonderful job, and it was so fun to hear their different thoughts and opinions on things. So before we get on into this, as well as leaving all of those lovely ladies in my description box, I'm going to of course leave Annette from Annette's Makeup Corner and her most recent video because that is who I got this idea from. And so, you know, we just want to give credit where credit is due. So I think that is all of the rambling that I have. I think that is all the housekeeping stuff. But again, I try to leave everything that you will ever need in that description box. So if you have a question, just seek it out there first. But if you don't find your answer, you can always leave a comment. Alright, so much like we did with the first video, I did have my husband randomly pick out 10 eyeshadow palettes for me. I'm so glad that he is such a trooper and putting up with my shenanigans. And I do have to say, funny side note, funny story, I thought that he would just go into the drawer and count like 1 through 10 and pick up the eyeshadow palettes like as a chunk, you know, and bring them to me and be like, here's your 10 randomly selected palettes, even though that's not really all that random. But he hasn't, because I know, I'm so particular, I know where every palette is within my palette drawers, and none of these palettes are like stacked together, even if they are from like the same brand, we'll say, right? They're not stacked together. So he actually is like going in there and picking them out randomly. Like, that's love, you know? So I decided to ask him, I was like, do you have like selection criteria for this? Because he's not like, you know, into makeup in any way. Like, this is the same man who thought all these years when I was like, oh, I'm buying another eyeshadow palette, it was because I had finished off the last one that I purchased. So he really has no idea about makeup. So I was just curious, like, what is your selection process for picking these things out, you know? So he told me he has been opening up every eyeshadow palette and looking at the shade names, and if the palette has a shade name that is inappropriate, he does not pick that palette. So I just think that's really funny, and that is something that we have joked about for a long time. It's like brands like NARS, I think, is the biggest offender, you know, like they have names for their blushes like Orgasm and Deep Throat and, you know, things like that. So he's just like, no, I don't like that. Like, it weirds me out that they have inappropriate names. So if you were curious, maybe his process isn't all that random. To me, it's random, but he is looking at shade names and making sure there are no inappropriate shade names. Okay, so now we can get on into this again like we did with last video. I will try to leave the brands like grouped together so that we can have them as chapters. So the first eyeshadow palette that he picked out comes from ColourPop. This is the Limoncello palette. Now I must say, if I can get this open, the magnet sometimes on this is like really strong. Either way, this is what this palette looks like on the inside. I kind of finished off the shade best, but I had really good pan on it and then the shade like crumbled out. But either way, that's neither here nor there. I have to say, this eyeshadow palette for the shimmers alone is so gorgeous. My top 2 favorite shimmers are Easy Peasy and Capri right here. They are some of my all-time favorite shimmers throughout my whole collection, like as a whole. Like, I think of them quite often. Absolutely love them. This Easy Peasy is one of those shifty shades where it has like the green-red kind of shift to it. And so it's just really pretty. The mattes in here, they're fine. Like, they're the good ColourPop formula, not the great ColourPop formula. They're just okay. This yellow can be a little bit underperforming. And then you guys all know my thoughts on having this blue eyeshadow in here because it doesn't really make sense with the rest of the palette, so I don't really understand it. With all of that being said, though, at the end of the day, this is a palette that I would repurchase basically just for the shimmer shades, which I know maybe isn't the smartest like purchasing decision, but like I said, all of the shimmer shadows that are within this palette are some of my favorite shades. They're a very lovely, very foiled formula and just so fun to play around with. The matte shadows, this is a neutral palette, so I have those matte shadows like time and time again. So it's not really like the draw of this palette for me. But yes, I would repurchase the ColourPop Limoncello palette. Okay, so let's talk about some BH Cosmetics palettes that he picked out. Honestly, I think I could just have 10 BH Cosmetics palettes for this video. But either way, the first one is the November Birthstone palette, which was Citrine that they released last year in 2021. So if I open this one up for you guys, this is what this looks like on the inside. Now, I will say I ignore the pressed glitter that comes within all of these Birthstone palettes. It's just not something that I want to put on my eyeball. So I'm not even gonna like really talk about that, because at the end of the day, even though there's a pressed glitter and that's one whole shade that I'm not going to use, this palette was still on the more affordable side in my opinion, clocking in at only $9. So I feel like it's fair, like I can just ignore that shade, you know? Either way, this palette has my favorite matte yellow shade from within here. So it's this unique shade. This is the best performing yellow in my collection that I have. It has such great pigment to it, and it's such a pretty kind of, not like necessarily neon yellow, but it is like, it's vibrant. Like you can see it on your face. Like they just did it right. And as far as this being like a smaller palette, I feel like all of the shadows that they picked out to go within this palette make so much sense. I love yellows and browns together. I think they're really pretty. And the benefit of these two matte browns that they have put in here, they are a little bit more on that yellow side, so they do blend in a little bit better than like think a chocolatey brown. And then the shimmer shadows within here are so pretty. I know these two look a little bit dark like in the pan, but they're not. Like they come off a little bit lighter on your lids. And so you guys know, like I do tend to like a lighter lid shade. And so I do find a lot of enjoyment out of these. So even with this being like such a small palette, I feel like since it was done so well, there's so much that I can do with this. This is a palette that I think about, like as I'm laying in bed at night, like, ooh, I need to pull that palette out and use it. I just love it that much. So of course I would repurchase my BH Cosmetics Citrine for November Birthstone palette. Okay, so the next BH Cosmetics palette that we will talk about is the Low-Key Love You palette. So this came from their Say It collection. This is what I would classify as a more neutral eyeshadow palette, even though it is like more on the red heavy side. So out of the shades that I have used from this is the same great BH Cosmetics quality that I have come to know and love and expect from them. Although I don't know how I can say that now because they have been bought out. But either way, that's for a different video. So back to this palette. I will say this is the same great quality. However, this palette is a little too red heavy for me, and specifically a little too mid-tone red heavy. So the darkest shadow within this palette is this shadow up here, which is kind of like a plummy brown kind of shade, a shade that I have quite a lot in my collection. So this matte, and this matte, even though they might look like they have different depths to them within the pan, like as you're seeing it on camera, on the eyes, like these can come across very samey. So that means that a lot of the eyeshadow looks that I do using this palette do come across looking quite similar. And that is a little bit frustrating, especially when it is such a small palette. Like there's just a lot of repetitiveness to it. As far as the shimmer shadows go, these two right here, this one's more of like a gray bronze, and then this one's like a straight up bronze. I'm just not a bronzy type of girl. Like it's just not an eye look that I really like to do. So I don't really get a lot of use out of those two shimmers. This pink one though, it's like a peachy pink shimmer, and that one is quite lovely. So as a whole, even though I really do like overall enjoy this palette because of the quality of it, I would not repurchase this simply because, like I said, it's a little too samey. 2 out of the 3 shimmers are shimmers that I really don't like to use. So yeah, just not a bad palette, but not one that I would repurchase. Okay, so the last BH Cosmetic palette that he picked out is actually Amour and Amalfi. So I just have to quickly say, if you own Chilling in Chicago, let me know, is this the same color story, just rearranged? Because my theory is that when they updated their travel series collection, they gave us this Amour and Amalfi and Beautiful in Barcelona, but they did not give us Love in London or Chilling in Chicago. And I think it's because it's just they rearranged those color stories and put them with a different travel destination. So let me know if my theory is correct, if you own Chilling in Chicago. But either way, Amour and Amalfi. So this is just a very basic neutral palette, as you guys can tell, but I absolutely love this. I love this selection of the like mustardy yellows, the like rosy pinks, and the browns that they put in here. And I feel like some of these matte shadows, they lean more on like, I'm gonna say the neutral side, like they're not too cool, but they're not too warm. And so it just adds a little bit of like extra funness to it, like extra uniqueness as far as like what goes in my collection. And I know down here, like some of these shimmer shades right here, this is a matte mustard shade, but these three shimmer shades, they do probably look a little bit bronzy to you guys on camera. However, when I put them on my eyes, they are not bronzy. They are more of like a yellow shimmer, like a golden yellow, not bronzy, but golden yellow. And that is a shimmer shade that I can get behind and really love to rock. So I do enjoy coming to this palette just for simple, like neutral eye looks. I really think that this is a palette that I could see myself panning, even though it is so neutral. Like it's just so much fun to play with. So again, same great BH Cosmetics quality that we have come to know and love, and might sadly be missing and mourning here soon. But either way, I think with all of that I have said with this, it's no surprise that this palette would be a repurchase for me. Okay, so the next palette to talk about comes from Oden's Eye. So this is from their Älva 2 collection. This is the Mini Ocean palette. Now this was the palette that I got in my Oden's Eye mystery box for 2022. So I will say I have not used every shadow from within this palette, but the ones that I have used, this is the same like good Oden's Eye quality formula that I've come to like know and expect from them. So I do like it for that reason. However, these two shades down here throw me off. This like kind of orangey red and then this brown shade. I just really wish that they would have committed with the blue theme. I feel like the split pan shimmer here in the middle, both of these shades go with this blue side. There's not really anything that goes with this orangey brown side. So I wish that maybe we would have gotten some like teals or minty shades, or even just some more blue shades, and really like just flushed this out and made this kind of like a more monochromatic palette. I think it would have been a lot more successful. I have to say too, this split pan here makes me so nervous that I'm gonna like mix the shadows together and then they're not gonna be pretty and like fun to use. I don't know, I'm toying with the idea of like trying to dig this out and press them individually into pans. If you have done that with any of your split pan shadows, let me know how successful you have been. So with all of that, that's a lot more like cons than pros. So this would not be a palette that I would repurchase for myself, simply because, like I said, the split pan makes me really nervous. I don't enjoy shadows that are like that. And then the color story does throw me off a little bit because I do feel like it's disjointed, and I wish they would have just kept it on like a more monochromatic trend. Alright, so the next eyeshadow palette that we can talk about comes from Kaleidos. So this is from their Futurism line. This is the Futurism 3, the Astro-Pink palette. Oh, dare I say this might be my favorite Futurism palette, even beating out the Sci-Fi Green? I don't know, but either way, this palette is just so fun, and it's so well curated for a 6-pan palette in my opinion. I absolutely love these two shimmer shadows. Now, would I at the end of the day wish that there were more shimmer shadows in here? Yes, of course. But the two that they gave us are quite lovely. This Light Year shade for me is just one of my favorite types of lid shades. It is a light kind of pinky purple taupey shade. I just have so much fun wearing those, especially in the winter time for like a more neutral eye look. And then this Nebulous shade here, it comes across very blue on camera, but it does have like a little bit of a purple shift to it. And again, it just pairs nicely with these shades. Now the matte black does have glitter in it, and I do kind of wish that it didn't have glitter in it. However, that doesn't really affect your eye look if my memory serves me correctly. Like I don't think that the glitters show up and they don't really like fall out on your face or anything like that. And then these two matte shades that are down here as I blind you with the mirror, the two like more brown shades here, I know that on camera they probably look very samey, very similar. And they probably are. Like we could have maybe done without one of them and had that like third shimmer like I'm talking about. But they do give you a different kind of depth on the eye. And I feel like this one, the first one, the lighter one, is a little bit more warmer toned than the second one, which is a little bit more cool toned. So at the end of the day, I just think that this was such a really well done palette. Really happy to have it in my collection, and it is one that I would repurchase. All right, so if I'm not mistaken, this is palette number 7. So it is the BattyBean palette that she did in collaboration with Shroud Cosmetics. So this is the It's Freakin Bats palette. Let me open this up for you. I have to say, I really love the like chaoticness of this color story. I feel like when you first open this palette, you're like, oh my, what do I do with that? But the more I have used it and the longer I sit here and look at it, it actually becomes less chaotic, and I feel like this is like a very like well-rounded color story. All of the shadows within here, I do have to say, are pretty unique to like my collection. Like I might have something similar, but they're not quite like this. You know what I mean? The shimmer shadows in here are quite lovely. They're such a good formula. They're the type of shimmer shades that are like really impactful and in your face. They almost look fold on your eyes when you do wear them. And so I do have to say, I've had a lot of fun coming to this palette, creating a lot of looks. Some of my favorite looks to do are like doing this Trappa shade. I feel like Trappa is a very unique eyeshadow within this palette, where it's very much of like a limey chartreuse green, we will say, but it pairs beautifully with every shimmer shadow as well as every matte shadow within here. So at the end of the day, I really don't have any complaints about this palette. This would be something that I would repurchase. I just have so much fun with it. It's one of the like more creative palettes within my collection, we'll say. Like, it's a palette that actually does make me think and try to be like, you know, exploratory, is that even a word? It's a palette that pushes me out of my comfort zone, and I do enjoy it for that, and so I would repurchase this palette. Alright, so the next palette we will talk about comes from Sugar Drizzle Cosmetics. So this is their Butterfly palette. Now, I don't tend to bring up packaging a whole lot just because, I don't know, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to put too much emphasis on the packaging. Like, I want some sturdy packaging to where if I drop my palette, it's going to survive. But I try not to put too much, you know, weight on like the aesthetics of it, we will say. However, with this palette, I do feel like the outside of this is just very kind of bland, and so that does kind of ruin the experience just a little bit, we will say. Like, I do find this to be like my least inspiring Sugar Drizzle palette, and I think it's just this outside packaging plays a lot into that. Now, the inside is where it really does matter, let's be honest. So the quality of these shadows within here are the same great Sugar Drizzle Cosmetics quality formula that I've come to know and love. Like, I get the same, you know, enjoyment out of using like the Frosty Flamingo palette as far as quality goes as I do with this one. So the shimmer shadows in here, specifically this one, and this one, I think on camera they come across looking like, ooh, are those glitters? But from what I can tell, they're not glitters. They're just more chunky shimmer shades. They do look very fold on your eyes, and I do have a lot of fun playing with those. I feel like with the matte shadows in here that they gave you, this purple and then these two greens, it is a little bit limiting with what I find I can do with this palette, because again, these shadows, like this one is the darkest, but these two over here, even though they're two very different colors, they have the same amount of depth to them. So at the end of the day, while I do enjoy the shimmer shadows within here, I think you get a lot of fun shifty shades, a lot of fun shimmer shades. The matte shadows, I just wish that there had been something different to like make this a little bit more well-rounded, in my opinion. And I feel like this palette was very much more of a impulse purchase for me. So while it's staying in my collection and I still do enjoy it, this is something that I would probably think about a little bit better and actually not repurchase. Okay, so palette number 9 comes from Glamlite. So this is their Dirty Martini palette. This was from their Happy Hour collection. So this was their green themed eyeshadow palette. Did Haley need another green themed eyeshadow palette? Probably not. Not even probably, just not. But either way, it's here now. So I do have to say, I really do appreciate the color story of this palette. I feel like some of the greens in here are greens that I do have within other palettes. Like, they do lean more on that army green side. But within this palette, I feel like there's more kind of mid-tone greens. And so some of these matte shadows within here really do flesh out some of my other green eyeshadow palettes. And so I do appreciate it for that. I also love that you have a mix of like these tealy blue kind of shades within this palette. I feel like that kind of takes it in a different direction. All of the shimmer shadows in here just make sense with the matte shadows that they did pick out to go within this palette. So I will have to say, while I wish I would have thought about this a little bit more as like a conscious consumer and like really thought like, okay, you have a lot of green eyeshadow palettes, like I probably could pull out something and get a very similar look to this. I do at the end of the day really enjoy this palette and really like the Glamlite formula. So I would have to say that I would repurchase this eyeshadow palette. Okay, so palette number 10, the last one we will be talking about, is actually my most expensive eyeshadow palette. So it comes from Natasha Denona. This is the Metropolis eyeshadow palette. So this is a 28 pan palette because if I'm not mistaken, like the green, brown, and the purple blue palette are also 28 pans. However, I think there's double the product in those than what you get in this. But I feel like this is a little bit more of a manageable size for me as far as like amount of shadows and product that you get within here. So I do absolutely love like the green side of this palette. You guys know that's no surprise, that would be my favorite side. I have been starting to enjoy this warmer, more red orange side of the palette though too. I will say I wish there wasn't so many reds and oranges. I wish that this side of the palette was a little bit more fleshed out as far as the color story goes. Every time I do dip into this palette though, I really do enjoy it and I enjoy the looks that I come up with. However, I will say I don't really feel like any of these shadows are so special and so unique. Like none of them are like super like interesting multi-chromes, we will say, to where like if the palette was gone, like you would really miss it. Like at the end of the day, I really feel like if you shop your stash, you probably have all of these shades in here. So I go back and forth because this is such an expensive palette. And I only have like 4 eyeshadow pans in here to show for it. Like this is in no way like one of my most used palettes, and that makes me really sad because it is the most expensive and I just feel like I should give this palette more attention. But in the sea of eyeshadow palettes that I have, like that's just not the case. That's just not the reality. I think I put a lot of sentimental value onto this too because it was a Christmas gift from my husband. So that makes me really want to hold on to this, you know, come hell or high water. But if I take that sentimentalness out and I just think about like color story and everything like that and the price and how much uses I've gotten out of this, I would have to say this would actually be a palette that I wouldn't repurchase just simply because it is so expensive and I'm never going to get that $129 worth out of this palette, you know? So that wraps it up. I hope that you guys enjoyed this round 2. Let me know down below if you agree or disagree with any of my thoughts. Again, I highly encourage you to go check out all of the lovely ladies that I have listed in my description box as well as their videos because I know without a doubt you will enjoy them. And again, if you would like to film something similar to this, let me know down below if you end up doing it because I would love to go and check it out. So again, I appreciate you sticking till the end. Hope you're having a good day, a good night, or a good whatever, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.